This hearing, zoning hearing board is called to order. In preparation for our proceeding tonight, I asked you please turn your phones into do not disturb and vibrate and all the stuff. Thank you very much. For your information, this, like all township meetings, is being recorded and shared via virtual meeting. Cameras are rolling, I believe. Okay, excellent. Few introductions before we get started. To my far right is Dave Conroy. He is our zoning and planning officer. TJ Walsh is the solicitor for the zoning hearing board. Kathy Basili is a member of the zoning hearing board. Scott Fisher is a member of the zoning hearing board. Brian Wants is an alternate for the zoning hearing board. Sean Gresh is the solicitor for New Britain Township, and Rose Schwam is our stenographer this evening. A little housekeeping before we get started. New Britain Township Zoning Hearing Board is a quasi-judicial body required by statute of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and created by the New Britain Township Board of Supervisors. This board is chartered with a single responsibility to provide due process to the citizens of New Britain Township to appeal zoning and engineering decisions made by the township. The zoning ordinance was created and is maintained by the New Britain Township Board of Supervisors. This zoning hearing board has no jurisdiction over the contents of the zoning ordinance. We ask that any concerns regarding the contents of the zoning ordinance be directed to the Board of Supervisors. So, our procedure for tonight's hearing shall be as follows. The proceeding shall be conducted in a manner similar to that of a court proceeding, and all testimony shall be recorded by the stenographer. All affected parties shall have opportunity to present factual testimony this evening, and all testimony must be given under oath. Only the facts and testimony presented to the board during this hearing will be considered. The board will first hear the applicant's presentation of their case. The board expects the applicant to state the unnecessary hardship, how the proposal will not be detrimental to the public welfare, and any other grounds the applicant believes support the application. The board will also hear from any other individuals who wish to become parties to this hearing. After the testimony is concluded, the board will hear from anyone who simply wishes to make a statement or ask a question that is relevant to the hearing. And depending on the length of the hearing, the board may or may not make a decision on the applications this evening. Our first application tonight is for Chalfont Holdings LLC at 545 West Butler. Are we going to put that on record?
Yeah, we're opening the matter. They have requested a continuance. So we will continue that matter on the record to the February 15th, 2024 meeting of the board. That's the board's regular meeting in February. There will be new public notice and advertising given for that.
So then we'll read the public notice at that time.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So the next order of business is, excuse me, is for the DeSandro hearing, which has been continued from November, and we will resume that this evening. You may, please do.
Thank you, Chair. May it please the board, my name is Bill Dudek, and with me here this evening are the applicants on this matter. We have Heather DeSandro to my right, and her husband, Fred DeSandro, is seated here as well. Heather will be our only witness in terms of the township's enforcement notices, as well as our request in the alternative for variance relief from the two notices of violation dated July 7th, 2023.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
May we be seated?
Yes, please do.
Thank you.
As we've already put this public notice on record and read the board exhibits, we're going to proceed from there. We'll dispense with party status as there's no one else in the room. And in that case, Rose, will you please swear our witness?
Do you swear? Sorry. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on procedure first regarding this. At the last meeting, we did amend our application so that we were not only requesting dimensional variance relief from the non-permitted improvements, as well as use variance relief from the commercial activity. But we also amended it to provide for an appeal from the enforcement notice itself. And I believe Mr. Gresh mentioned during the last hearing, and this was why we got a continuance, because it would be the township's burden under section 6.6.1 of the MPC to proceed on the notices of violation.
I mean, it's correct on the burden, but are you prepared to let him reserve on that if you want to put your case on first?
Oh,
And then
okay.
but
Would you, okay, I just wanted to make sure, because the case law said that the township presents its evidence first.
on the note, yes, on the notice of violation, it does, but if you want to reserve on that and present the variance part first,
Okay,
okay, but I mean, if you're expecting the township to proceed first on that, then yeah, we can ask him to present his case.
yes, I would prefer that.
So are you prepared, Mr. Gresh?
Of course.
Okay, we'll do that then.
I think that would just make it easier for our presentation, then we would,
Understood, that's fine.
yeah, we will defend the enforcement as well as establish the testimony for the hardship and no
Understood.
detrimental effect. If I may. Okay, thank you. So,
Okay, so the first piece that we'll hear is the appeals from the enforcement notices, which have been marked for the prior hearings, B14 and B15. And as Mr. Dudek correctly indicated, the township has the burden of going first and they have the burden of proof on those. So Mr. Gresh?
Thank you. The township calls David Conroy.
You swear to give me the truth.
Thank you.
Mr. Conroy, how are you employed?
Officer.
And how long have you been employed as the zoning officer for New Britain?
1 year, January 3rd,
What are the duties of the zoning officer of New Britain Township?
to enforce the zoning ordinance of the township.
Are you familiar with the provisions of the zoning ordinance of the township?
I am.
Typically, when you're called upon to enforce the zoning ordinance, how does that arise?
Usually a complaint by a resident. Usually that's what we work on, in this township.
Are you familiar with the property at 756 North Blind Kiln Pike?
I am.
Am I correct that the property located at 756 North Lime Kiln Pike is located within New Britain Township, Bucks County, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the zoning map of New Britain Township?
I am.
Can you tell the board which zoning district that specific property resides in?
The watershed zone.
Are you familiar with the uses permitted in the watershed district under section 27-501 of the New Britain Township zoning ordinance?
Yes.
How did was that, and when I say the property, I'm referring specifically to 756 North Lime Kiln Pike, understood? How was that property brought to your attention?
By a complaint. Anonymous.
What did the complaint, what did the complaint allege?
They allege they heard barking during the day, at night, stuff like that this was during the summer.
During the summer of 2023?
Correct.
When you received that anonymous complaint, what did you do, sir?
I investigated the property. I sent a letter to the property asking about the complaint.
And am I correct that that's that letter that was previously marked, and I believe the date on the letter is incorrectly noted as July the 21st? Is that right? And I'm sorry to the board, I don't have the marking on the letter as to which exhibit that is before you. Mr. Walsh,
Yeah, it is. It's actually has not been marked.
I don't think it needs to be. I presume that it was.
It was not. We can mark it as, since we're referring to it, so we have something to reference.
That's fine.
We'll mark that as B16.
16.
The letter itself bore a date of July 21st, but it actually was June 21st.
I'll stipulate to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Judith. Mr. Conroy, you're familiar with the letter we're talking about that's now been identified as B16? Correct. That was a letter that was actually signed by Mr. Gaiman, your former assistant, is that right? Correct. But you had a hand in its drafting and it being sent? After you sent the letter, you said you investigated the property. What does that mean?
I believe Ryan and I, as well as our township solicitor, your colleague, Mr. Jeff Gart, went out to the property just to see what was going on.
Was that an unannounced visit or was it planned?
I was planning,
Or so you coordinated that with the owners?
correct.
And I'm not gonna ask you for a specific date, but approximately when did you view the property?
But it was probably sometime in July or August. I want to say August.
Okay. What, well, would it have been, are you familiar with the zoning? Are you familiar with the zoning violation letters that you sent out in this matter? Dated July the 7th, that are before the board marked as B14 and B15.
Yes,
Am I correct that the date on those letters is correct, July the 7th?
correct.
Given that date, could you tell me whether your visit happened before or after that date?
After,
It would have been after that date.
correct.
Well, if you sent the notices of violation on July 7th,
I can get you,
all I'm trying to do is narrow it down. Suffice to say, this summer you went to the property.
correct.
Upon arriving at the property, what did you find?
I found, for a lack of a better term, or what, it looked like a kennel to me, just the way. It looked like a residential house, but it also looked like a kennel.
So let's walk through that. Is the property improved?
It is.
Improved with what? What sits on the property?
There's a single. Couple of above ground pool in the backyard and court, basketball court.
Single family dwelling, do you know if it's inhabited?
It is.
By whom?
Presume it's Sandra.
The other accessory buildings that you found improving the property, do you know whether or not they're permitted structures?
They were not permitted. Yeah, there was no permits pulled.
Upon viewing the exterior of, without going into any of the buildings, was it apparent, based on what you saw outside the buildings, that there was some sort of commercial activity occurring on the property?
It seemed to me, yes.
Why? What did you see?
It seemed like there was like a parking cutout. There weren't lined parking stripes or anything like that. But there was a little sign that says, I forget exactly what, like kennel drop or doggy drop off or something to that regard.
Was that sign on the street on Limekiln, or was it on the driveway?
It was on the driveway.
The driveway in question, is it paved? Is it gravel? What's its material?
I believe it's blacktop.
Was the parking area that you just described, was it also paved? Could you tell from its appearance whether or not it was a part of the entire paving or whether it had been added on?
It looked like it was added on.
Had any permits regarding impervious surface or anything like that been pulled for that add-on, to your knowledge?
Not.
And when I say to your knowledge, before your visit to the property, did you review what the township would call the property file concerning this property?
I did.
And that property file, as is ordinary and customary, would contain any permit applications and permits that were granted to the property. Is that right?
Correct.
Were there any permits in the property file when you reviewed it?
Not for a kennel, maybe for like a use and occupancy. But that,
Use and occupancy for the residents.
correct.
Okay.
I believe that was.
Any business permits?
No.
Any documentation of any applications for variance? Any documentation of any other permits to add the accessory structures? Were there other equipment or apparatus located around the exterior of the property?
Yes, there was probably like a dog run area, more of a pen type area. And yeah,
When you say a pen, a separately secured, like fenced in area,
yeah, mulched area where,
almost like a small dog park?
Correct.
Okay. Would such an apparatus need to be permitted in the township?
maybe the fencing part. But that's it.
But I believe you said it was mulched, it wasn't blacktop or any sort of
Right.
impervious, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you happen to view the interior of any of the structures?
The main dwelling. Only went in, I guess, the lower level.
Okay, it's a multiple level structure?
I believe it's a split level, I guess, classified as,
All right. When you went in the lower level, what did you see?
looked like a bunch of cages.
How many did you see approximately?
Mm, 12, something.
And approximately how large were the cages?
I don't know if they were all the same size, but. 6 by 6,
Were they constructed of metal or wood or some other material?
maybe a little bit of both.
Were there any animals in those cages when you were there?
There might have been. I think it was during the day. I think most of them maybe were outside or.
Okay.
I,
So
maybe a couple.
were there animals outside when you were there?
There might have been a couple.
When I say animals, what kind of animals did you see?
I'd say no,
Any other kind of animals besides dogs?
not that I would.
Did you have any conversations with the applicant when you were at the property?
Yeah,
Did you discuss what sort of activity was occurring at the property that you were seeing?
yeah.
What was the topic of discussion? What'd you talk?
I mean, it was pretty obvious why we were there.
Well, let me put a finer point on it. Did the applicant tell you what they were doing at the property, why they had all the dogs there, why they had the cages there?
I think eventually, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
and it was being run, or it either at that time at least was being run as a dog spa, correct?
correct.
Dogs were kept sometimes overnight.
Mhm.
Was that discussed?
You have to say yes or no.
Yes,
Was it discussed whether or not the dogs stayed overnight?
I believe so, yeah.
And were you able to confirm that the dogs did in fact stay overnight?
Correct.
Did you discuss how many dogs at any one time could be maintained or kept at the facility?
Yes,
And what was the number that was given?
15 to 20.
In your conversations with the applicant at the property, was it confirmed that the applicant lives at the property, or at least someone lives at the property in the single family dwelling?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the? Well, let's put it this way, I'll call your attention to, and I believe it was B14. You wouldn't happen to have B14 in front of you, would you? It's your letter dated July the 7th, 2023 regarding the use,
Mhm.
the unpermitted use. Are you familiar with that?
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, sorry.
And am I correct, Mr. Conroy, that in that document B14, you classified the use in question as an A9 pet resort? Is that right?
Correct, yes,
Are you familiar with the definition of an A9 pet resort as it relates to the New Britain Township zoning ordinance?
I am.
Do you happen to have it in front of you? Or would you?
I do.
Let me put it to you this way. I'm going to read you a portion of that ordinance. Definition. Facilities routinely used for daily and overnight boarding of pets, doggy daycare, grooming and spa services, training, rehabilitation therapy, swim therapy, massage, exercise and socialization of pets. Have you heard that definition before?
Yeah.
Am I correct that that is the definition of a pet resort as detailed in the New Britain Township zoning ordinance?
Yeah.
The use A13?
So the A9 was a typo, an A13 use, or is it an A9 use? In B14,
I would.
which definition, Mr. Gress, did you
The-
just read?
The definition I just read, sir, is A13 pet resort.
So, Mr. Conway, on the B14, it says the A9 parent pet resort, is what A9 is not. That's a commercial kennel use. Pet resort is an A13, and Mr. Gress just read you the definition of pet resort. So would you say the A9 is a typo?
Yes, I would.
So you've cited this, the use citation was for conducting a pet resort.
Yeah.
Not permit, okay.
Mr. Conroy, in that same vein, are you familiar with the definition and use of a commercial kennel under the New Britain Township zoning ordinance?
I am.
Is either a pet resort use A13 or a commercial kennel use A9 permitted
Objection.
Overruled.
as a use by right under the New Britain Township ordinance in the watershed district?
No, they are not.
Is there already a primary use present and attendant on the property?
Objection.
Overruled.
Mr. Conroy,
Yes,
what would that use be?
single family dwelling.
Does the property file here contain any permit applications or any permits to allow for a second primary use on the property?
Objection.
Well, that one's been asked and answered.
Then I'll withdraw. Mr. Conroy, are you aware of whether or not a pet resort or commercial kennel is permitted as a residential accessory use under the watershed district?
Objection.
Overruled.
It is not.
Are you aware whether a commercial kennel or pet resort, A9 or A13, is permitted or allowed as a general accessory use or structure under the watershed district?
Objection.
Overruled.
It is not.
Are either of those uses allowed by special exception in a watershed district?
Objection.
Is your standing objection that he's not qualified to give a legal opinion?
No, it's that it's beyond the scope of the enforcement notice. This was only cited as being a pet resort.
All he's asking him is, does he know if either one of those uses is permitted?
I know, so I object to the relevance of the question, that's all.
All right, well, he's including it in the alternative. The question is an A9 or an A13. If you want to make an argument that your client has not been cited for an A13 use, I'll sustain that objection.
That is my objection.
Okay, so you can dispense with then making the objection to the extent that there is an A. Strike that. The objection would be sustained to the extent that there has been a notice of violation issued for an A9 commercial kennel use, because under this record, there has not been.
No,
That's what the clarification of why I asked Mr. Conroy those questions.
and that's my objection, Mr. Walsh.
Okay, is that fair?
It's fine.
Well, I know it's fair. I ruled, but I'm guiding you, Mr. Gress, that if you're gonna, I won't prevent you from asking questions in the alternative about is this use permitted versus that use, because they've asked for a variance for an A13 use. So it's a relevant question. But to the extent,
Well, we'll withdraw that now that it's not being cited for an A13.
So it is being cited for an A13.
I mean, an A9.
it's not being cited A9, correct?
Right, so we withdraw a variance application for A9 now that it's been shown it was a typo, that it was supposed to just be pet resort.
Off the record. We just did a half hour on a typo.
Yeah.
We couldn't. That's off the records.
So we'll withdraw that request for variance, since it's not being cited for a kennel. We don't need the variance relief. We only need variance for pet resort. If the enforcement's upheld.
The enforcement's upheld to the extent that you were appealing an A13 because or an A9 because one is an issue. Okay. You have the right to alternatively ask for either one of those grounds for relief.
We're not going to ask for a commercial kennel though.
Okay, so you want to go back on the record, and when this is done, you don't need to do that right now.
Right.
When
And I
this
don't
part's
understand it.
finished,
I just need to make sure I make my objection, I don't want to miss something and then the court looks at it if necessary and says we didn't object.
no, okay, we can go back on the record. Okay. All right, so the discussion off the record was whether a notice of violation citing the applicants for conducting an A9 commercial kennel is part of this record. It's been understood and agreed upon based upon my rulings and everyone's review that the only notice of violation as it relates to a use is an A13 pet resort.
I concur.
Okay, so from the going forward perspective, the township does not have any obligation to put forth any evidence on an A9 use. It's strictly on an A13 use.
And I will still limit my questions.
Right, and the township, to the extent that the applicant would proceed with requesting an alternative variance for an A9 or A13 use, they would reserve the right to object to that or to take an opposing position, but you will have the opportunity of what you want to do with that requested relief when we get to the alternative variance portion of the hearing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Was that clear? Was that okay, Rose? Did you get on? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Conroy, is the A13 use permitted by special exception in the watershed district? Is it permitted by conditional use in the watershed district? Is any property in the township under the zoning ordinance allowed to possess two primary uses without the benefit of a permit or leave of this board?
I can't help you.
I ask for the board's indulgence for a moment, please. Mr. Conroy, in addition to citing the use violation, you also noticed by separate cover a number of dimensional violations. Is that correct? And I'm calling your attention now to B15. That is a 2-page letter signed by you. Do you have that in front of you? You're familiar with that document? Is that yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Do that one more time.
If I may, I would stipulate as to the dimensionals, because after we got a survey that we shared with the township, and it does show that there are dimensional violations. So we'll stipulate to those.
All right, well,
Speed things
but
along.
yes, but I'd still like in an expeditious manner to have it,
Okay,
because if somebody's gonna have to read this,
right.
who's not here, which may happen, I'd like the dimensional pieces of the record in the record.
So if I may suggest, what I could do is detail each one of the dimensional violations. And if council wishes to so stipulate that they are in fact violations, we could do it one at a time, so long as we make a record of each. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, I'd like to at least just get the numbers.
Yes.
Very good.
Right. So-
Are you going to?
He's gonna do it as an offer, he'll confirm it.
So as an offer of proof, and Mr. Conroy, if you could follow along with me, am I correct that you alleged the following violations of the dimensional provisions of the New Britain Township zoning ordinance? Specifically, section 27-502 F2 concerning the 15-foot setback. I'm sorry, 15-foot accessory structure location from the rear or side of the principal building on the lot.
Yes.
Section 27-502 F3. A violation of the provision that all accessory structures shall be located a minimum of 15 feet from the rear and side lot lines of the property.
Yeah.
Section 27-502 B1 subsection H.1. The properties within the watershed district are permitted a maximum impervious ratio of 12% of the total lot area, and that the property appears to contain more than the required maximum amount of impervious surface.
Yeah.
Section 27-502 B5. Requiring stormwater management facilities shall be designed to manage the runoff from the total existing and proposed impervious surfaces on the site. You allege that violation as well, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And section 27-3002. That hereafter no use may be established or changed. No structure shall be erected, constructed, reconstructed, altered, raised, removed, and no building used or occupied, changed in use, or changed in non-residential use occupancy until a zoning permit has been secured from the zoning officer. You allege that as well. And to be clear, that last allegation, am I correct that that is concerning the principal residence and a use being housed in that residence of something other than a principal residence?
Yes.
I make that offer of proof, and I would ask for a stipulation as to those violations based upon council's previous representation of the board.
Mr. Dudek, do you still stipulate as such?
I stipulate to number one, because the uh, shed is, within the 15 feet of the rear and side of the principal building. I stipulate to number two, because the shed is not a minimum of 15 feet from the side lot line that it shares with 764 North Lime Kiln Pike. I stipulate to number three, because the impervious surface coverage according to the survey is in excess of 12%. I stipulate to number four, that there has been no stormwater management facilities designed for this property. And I stipulate to number five, that no zoning permits have been obtained for either the use, the driveway, or the shed.
If I could just ask for some clarification from the witness and counsel, if, when I read number five, the last line in non-italics letters says permits were not obtained for any of the above noted improvements. This is improvements, as I read it, to mean any of the improvements referenced in numbers 1, 2, and 3, since 4 doesn't reference any improvements. So we're talking about an accessory shed / garage. We're talking about another accessory shed, or I can't tell if it's the same accessory shed in 1 and 2, and a basketball court. Are those the 3 improvements we're discussing?
Yes.
Okay, are there 2 different sheds?
Go on, Mr. Walsh.
So the accessory shed / garage in number 1 is the same accessory shed that's in number 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But I don't know, in looking at this, they referenced about a permit for a use, but I only thought this had to do with improvements. I didn't know it had anything to do with changing use. I always thought we were just talking about structures. That's my only caveat.
Understood.
Okay.
Mr. Conroy, in your investigation of the property when you were there to view it, and your conversations with the applicant, did it become apparent to you, and was it confirmed? Well, one at a time, I'm sorry. Did it become apparent to you that the property was being used for the daily and overnight boarding of pets?
Yes.
Did it become apparent to you that the property was being used as a dog daycare?
Yeah.
Do you know whether or not grooming and spa services were being offered to the dogs in question?
By me being at the property?
Or by talking to the applicant?
I believe so, yes.
You previously mentioned that there was what you called a dog run outside. Were there any dogs in it at the time that you visited?
There might have been,
Were there more than one?
yes.
So would you agree then that exercise and socialization of pets was going on at that time?
Yeah.
In your conversations with the applicants, were all of those things confirmed to you?
Yeah.
Was it noted to the applicants at that time that none of those activities were permitted without a permit for an A13 pet resort use?
Yeah.
I ask for the board's indulgence for a moment, please. To be clear, Mr. Conroy, in your conversations with the applicant here, was it apparent to you whether this is being done, these pet services were being done on a free basis or on a business basis being paid for?
Business.
In other words, the applicant was being paid for these services for dogs.
Yeah.
All I have for the witness, thank you.
Dudek, you have questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Conroy, do you have in front of you the definition of pet resort?
I do.
Okay. How many times did you visit the properties?
I've probably been out there 3 times.
Do you know the dates you were there?
Off the top of my head, no.
What investigation did you conduct as to whether or not there was overnight boarding of pets? Could you please describe it?
Well, investigating online, on the company's website. It was apparent.
That there was overnight boarding offered?
Correct.
Okay. What do you define as doggy daycare as being different from, is that the same or different from daily and overnight boarding of pets?
Doggy daycare would be, daily services. Yes,
And what investigation did you do to confirm that this activity was occurring at the property, routinely?
the website.
Okay. Did you investigate whether or not grooming and spa services were being offered?
Yeah, through the website.
Did the website say there are grooming and spa services offered?
Off the top of my head, I can't recall.
So are you not certain on that answer?
I'm probably not certain.
Okay, so you're not certain of that, but you are certain of the daily and overnight boarding of pets in the dog daycare, correct?
Correct.
But you are not certain that there is grooming and spa services offered.
Correct.
Are you certain that there was training being offered by this property owner?
Object to the relevance of the questioning. It is, unless the allegation is that each and every one of those things needs to be occurring in order to meet the definition of a pet resort.
That is
Overruled.
our theory.
Overruled.
Did you investigate whether or not training of dogs was being offered at the property?
Reviewing the website, probably, yes.
Probably yes, or certainly yes.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
You don't really remember, do you?
I can't say that I'm certain.
Or did you do any investigation to determine if rehabilitation therapy was being conducted?
I can't be certain.
Okay. Did you do any investigation to determine if swim therapy was being conducted?
I can't be certain.
How about massages?
I can't be certain.
But you are certain based upon going there that you saw exercise and socialization of pets?
Yes,
And am I correct too, that your visits there also outside of the website confirmed that there was daily and overnight boarding of pets because you saw those crates inside the house, right?
correct.
And you were familiar with the doggy daycare because you saw that exercise happening outside when you visited, right?
Correct.
So that even outside of the website, your own personal investigation witnessed these 3 things being daily and overnight boarding of pets, doggy daycare, and exercise and socialization, correct?
Correct.
But as for the other categories that constitute the definition of pet resort, you have no evidence to support that any of those activities occurred at the property as of the date of the violation, July 7, 2023, correct?
Objection to the form of the question. The question presupposes that each and every one of those is required to meet the definition, which is not the case.
Let's rephrase the question.
But as far as the other categories listed as being part of the definition of pet resort are concerned, you have no evidence to support that any of those activities had occurred at the property as of July 7, 2023, correct?
Correct.
So just 3 out of the 9 or 10 that are there? Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
Can you redirect, Mr. Kresh?
No,
Any board questions?
Regarding Mr. Conway's testimony?
Correct.
Yes. Not at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy. Any other further witnesses? Mr.
Kathy, you?
Oh, do you have a question?
You said you went out there 3 times?
Third time was to post the property.
Ah.
For the zone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really, it was basically just one where you said you went with
I was there,
the solicitor, and that was more of the investigation with the permission of the property owner?
correct.
Did you ever identify who lodged the initial complaint with the township?
No.
Did you ever speak to any of the neighbors about the activities at the property
On the phone, yes, at that phone call.
with these neighbors?
With neighbors, yes.
Was it just general complaints or what were your conclusions after speaking with these neighbors?
I mean, it was after public notice went out.
After public notice of the hearing
Correct.
was, which would have been well after July 7th.
Correct.
Anything else?
Yep. Okay, thank you, Mr. Conrad. Dudek? Oh,
Are there other, are there pet resorts in New Britain Township?
Yeah.
Do they offer similar services, to what you experienced, what you witnessed, correct?
I presume, yeah.
Okay.
I just have a follow-up. Are you done?
Good.
You
I
sure?
have a
You think-
question.
no, okay, just go ahead, Mr. Fisher.
Conrad, when you said you observed the posted website for the business.
Mhm.
Do you have that website address or?
I'm about to introduce it. In my next witness.
Information? Okay. Anything else? Or
Mr. Walsh, go ahead.
No. I'm good.
Okay.
You have another witness, Mr. Grash?
Yes, I do. I
Okay.
call Heather DeSandro as a cross.
Okay, Mr. Sandra, you've been sworn?
Ms. DeSandro, you operate a business out of your house known as Heather's Happy Tales, is that right? And in that business, you're specifically in the business of doggy daycare and boarding of dogs, is that right? And for those services, you charge a very specific schedule of prices, is that right? And all of those prices can be found on your website, heathershappytales.com or something to that effect. Am I correct that Heather's Happy Tales website lists the address, the physical address of the business or the daycare at 756 North Limekiln Pike, Chalfont, PA? And that's your home, is that right? You live at that home? Who do you live there with? Okay. I believe it was described as a bi-level. Would you agree with that? It's a multi-level home.
Another floor above it.
I believe in your initial application before the board, you requested leave to house approximately 25 dogs. Is that right? I see. Do you have the physical plant, the cages, the area to accommodate 25 dogs? Would it be your intention, if this board were to allow it, to house as many or board as many as 25 animals at one time on the property? Why not?
My weekend or busy holidays is about 15.
I see from your website, and just to satisfy the board, I'll make this, would this be Township 1?
Yeah. P1.
P1. And I'm sorry, I only have one copy, but I will hand it to the witness and then I can publish it. So you just wanted it? Thank you. Thanks very much. Ma'am, your attorney's handed you a bundle of documents, which I've marked for identification purposes as T1. Could you just leaf through that for me briefly, please? That's it. Am I correct that those are printouts of your website for Heather's Happy Tales? Including the pricing structure for the boarding of dogs, both overnight and during the day? Ma'am, am I correct that you are not a licensed veterinarian? Am I also correct that your husband is not a licensed veterinarian? So you don't operate as an animal hospital of any kind, is that right? In the website, I noticed that you have add-on charges for different services, correct? But you have additional charges for going to pick up a dog, right? So if someone is utilizing your services and can't get to you, for an additional charge, you can go get the dog. Am I correct, though, that the majority of your clients drive the dog to your property? And am I correct that you were present in the hearing room this evening for Mr. Conroy's testimony? You heard Mr. Conroy talk about the parking area off of your driveway. Am I correct that that parking area was added to the driveway for the purpose of accommodating individuals who will come to drop off their animals?
It was that, and it was also that I got 2 new licensed drivers in my household, my 2 oldest kids. We just couldn't all fit in our driveway.
Sure, understand that. So I am correct that you operate as for lack of a better way to say it, a doggy daycare, right? And also you do board animals overnight, is that right? At any given time, how many animals are you boarding overnight?
My average regular week that's not a busy holiday booking time is 5 to 7.
In a normal, non-busy week? How about a busy week? Like, let's say in August during summer vacation time or around the holidays?
In summer, I'm probably likely up to my max for the weekends and possibly down to like more like the 7 to 10 range during the week.
When you say your max, are you referring to what you told us was your comfortable max or your actual license max?
Which was what again, ma'am?
15.
Thank you.
As part of the process to gain your license from the state to operate as a boarding location or a kennel, did you have to provide the state or certify with the state that you had received all appropriate permits and licensure from your local municipality? Is there any grooming that occurs at the property? How many animals do you allow to be outside at one time?
My group playtime, I'm comfortable with 6 to 8 dogs, depending on those dogs and their personalities.
Do you have any policies regarding leashing or otherwise securing animals when they are outside of the physical structure of the home?
Yes, yeah.
And what is that policy?
I have slip leads, which is kind of, it's the, not the chain chokers, but it slips over and gets tighter. And I have a belt that hooks on, so the dog is attached to me everywhere from the second it leaves the back door to the play area.
And then you walk them out to the play area using those apparatus, and then is the play area that secured, fenced in run that Mr. Connery was talking about?
I believe he was talking about, there is a small dog kennel area, but then there's also the large kind of like 1/4 acre large play area that's fenced in. So that's kind of where they do their social time. The other space is for just smaller dogs that I wouldn't necessarily want, in with the larger dogs.
How many dogs at one time will you place in the larger 1/4 acre recreation area?
Like that 6 to 8 range.
Okay. And meanwhile, the others remain inside?
Yes.
That's all I have for Mr. Sandro. Thank you. Oh, I would seek to admit T1.
No objection.
That will be received. Mr. Dudek, do you have any questions for Mr. Sanford?
That question.
And I don't, for purposes of the hearing, to make it simpler, I won't object. There's no reason for Mr. Dudek to be limited to my direct exam, to my, as a cross examination, and then have to ask his client separate questions if he needs to. I believe whatever Mr. Dudek wants to ask his client now would be the
Well,
appropriate
do you
time.
have any more witnesses?
No, she's my last witness.
Okay, so if you would like to begin your questioning with the topics that Mr. Bresch led with, and then tell us when you're done with that, because the board might like to have some questions on
Okay.
that, and then we'd get into that. I think, I understand what Mr. Gresh is saying, but I'd like to keep a little more order to it, because the board may have questions,
Okay,
and he might have redirect.
I'll begin my direct examination of Mr. Sandro. Okay,
Well, wait a minute, no, just keep it. Can you just questions related to what he just asked you? I know
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Gresh said
okay.
he wouldn't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with it per se, but I would like to keep the order of reading it in the record grouped together.
Okay. Yeah.
And the board might have questions.
Sure. Okay, all right, I'll do that. Mr. Sandro, during the examination by Mr. Brett, you mentioned something of having a E2 panel license, is that correct? All right, now, who issues that license? Okay, and show you a copy of what I believe are your licenses, is that correct?
Yes.
Are these current?
Yes.
Okay. Can I show these to the solicitor?
Yes.
Yes, would you like it marked, Mr. Dudek?
Yes. Yes, please, Mr.
Thank you.
All right, we can mark this as
Is this a copy? Okay.
Yeah.
we'll mark it as A1.
Yes, please.
I'll do it, Bill.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, we'll mark as A1, photocopies of two licenses. One for the year 2022, one for the year 2023, license number 18055, issued to Heather's Happy Trails LLC with the address of this, which is of the property that's the subject of the application. The license is issued by the Bureau of Dog Law Enforcement.
And as a condition precedent to that license, they didn't ask you anything about whether or not the use was permitted in your zoning district? Did you have any concerns as to whether or not the use was permitted?
I assumed I was doing what I was legally told I had to do by the state organ.
So are you saying when you got a license, you thought they wouldn't give it to you if you weren't allowed to have the business there? Is that what happened?
That's what I assumed. I assumed that was what I was supposed to be doing.
Are you regularly subject to unannounced inspections by the dog warden?
Yes, every 6 months we get unannounced checks by the dog warden.
Have you ever had any issues with it as a result of those inspections?
No.
Have you ever received any complaints from any neighbors about any issues with what you were doing there?
I have not been made aware of any complaints. In contact with every neighbor all around me.
And you said during your testimony, your average week was 5 to 7 dogs for boarding, is that correct?
Correct.
And what do you define boarding as?
Boarding is when an owner goes away for a holiday or a period of time and they drop off the dog and they stay overnight.
Is it,
Until they're picked up.
is one overnight boarding?
Is what, any overnight is considered boarding.
And,
What's the average length of stay?
Like 3 to 7 days.
Calendar days?
Yeah.
how does doggy daycare differ from boarding?
Doggy daycare is more geared toward the social interaction, and that's why they come for the daycare.
And what's the average amount of dogs there for the doggy daycare portion?
It's all inclusive, like everyone that comes for either boarding or daycare, they get the same exact schedule with the same exact play times. I don't separate the two of them.
And you mentioned you have, during your examination, you mentioned you have 2 areas for playtime, is that correct?
Correct.
Would you describe the 2 different areas for the board, please?
The smaller dog play area is a kennel, which is a 3 10x10s put together, so I guess it would be a 30 by 10 foot small for the small dogs.
This is outside?
Yes, it's the outside.
Okay. And the other?
And the other one is the gated in, large, I guess about a 1/4 acre, play area.
Okay, are both areas completely enclosed?
Yes.
Okay, are both there, are either one of those areas near any neighbors?
Not in the back.
All right, that's all I have for the questions that were generated by Mr. Gresh. And then I would just conclude that portion and then begin my direct examination.
Understood. Let's just see if we can have any follow. Do the board have any questions?
It's good. Martin?
I do, regarding the fenced outside play areas. Is it on a property line or is it set back?
So right now, the fenced in area that the dogs go out to their play area is not the entire backyard. So there's a gap between me walking the dogs from the inside of their space to the play area. Which is
About-
all the way in the back.
How many,
I would say about maybe 50 feet away from where they come outside. To where the play area is. Right now I have a permit that was approved for privacy fencing, so eventually. We will have the back completely enclosed, but right now we only have the privacy fencing on one side of the property that's completed, and we're waiting for the approvals on the shed before we can install the other side, and at that point, we'll be just completely closed in shop.
when you say privacy fence, like
It's a 6 foot high PVC privacy fence.
And that is intended to go next to the shed.
So so like the house is here, and then the shed is kind of right next to the house, and then the backyard is that whole, the square in the back. So right now, the one side is completely fenced in with a privacy fence, but on the other side, it would have to attach to the shed. And then attach to the back of the shed to completely enclose the backyard.
So I'm looking at I don't mean to cut you off, but maybe I'm looking at B4, which is the existing features plan.
Yes, so if.
So maybe if you could look at,
Oh, I know.
no, I understand that, but whoever reads this record probably doesn't. So if you could, in reference to B4, could you show us, or could you identify where the fence is, or?
I can give her a pen.
Well, let me do it this way. So that, you see that arrow in the upper left-hand corner there? The black arrow, okay, see that? All right, that's what's called the north arrow, all right? So the north side of your property is the top side lot line, as I'm looking at this, and that the shed you reference is is along the north side lot.
Yeah.
So is the fence you're talking about that you're waiting to be permitted, would that be running along the northern side lot line, or would that be running along the northern lot line of the property next to it? Further north.
It would be running that entire length of that side of the property.
Along your property line or some other location?
Along the property.
And you understand the property line is this pink line, is
Yeah.
that correct? Do you see that, Mr. Walker?
I see it, and I'm trying to reconcile how a fence is gonna go right through the shed.
The shed has been moved.
Okay, it has been moved.
Yeah.
So this plan B4 is old.
The shed has been moved for.
Off of property.
Okay, but okay, well, we started talking and she referenced it, so
Yeah,
Whether you're gonna say it has to be moved 15 feet somewhere else, so that's why we're waiting for the approvals and everything before we put a fence in, then we have to rip it out and move the shed somewhere else. So that's why we're waiting.
So the shed has been removed. Is the fencing that's identified as aluminum fence, which would be, I guess, on west, south, however,
The larger, yeah.
the larger play area fence in the back. Is that still in its present location? Is what's shown on B4?
That is.
Okay.
So that will be, that one side of the fencing will be removed once the privacy fencing goes in. So that it reflects the color. Weird angle that we had no idea was our property.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
So if I may, then, the plan that you submitted, the one you had there, so you have structures or part of your current property and business are on someone else's property, if I'm reading this correctly.
Well, it's not part, the shed is not part of the business. It's just a shed that we keep the zero turn and all his tools in.
So I'll rephrase my question. Your structures on your property that you've ascertained that have not been permitted, based upon the plan that we have to consider, are not fully on your property. Okay. That includes the dog run area, which is colored green on my image, and the shed that you said has been moved. And is the, what does this say? Pond, is that your pond?
The pond has been filled in and we have restored that area to its existing.
So that was your,
You said that both the neighbor and I both had thought that the line ran straight. We were not aware that it ran in a diagonal, so we got the survey.
okay, so the pink line is the property line. The green, the double green line is what you thought the property line was?
Yes,
When that's marked firm,
Because
you're representing that this, to Mr. Fisher's question, the garden area, pond area has been removed. Where has the shed been moved to?
so the shed is on a base that we needed to build up with fresh stone because the property is so wet. So the base is held in 2x4s or what, 6x6s. That raise it up so the shed's not sitting in wet ground. That base had some wiggle room, so we had a company come out, lift the shed up and move it all the way over as far as it could go on that base still.
closer to your residence.
Closer to the residence so that it would be off of, impeaching on that property line.
It's in the same general location.
Yes,
Closer to the house.
How far would you estimate the shed currently is to the structure of your property? What's the distance between your house and the shed?
Shows it on here. See that?
Well, you said you moved it off there, so it's closer to the.
yeah, we moved
This
it.
plan's no longer
to
valid,
an-
so. Let's see, it's here, it's on. So
So it's probably closer to 10 feet now.
Is that 11? So
One
you moved
more,
it
one
2
more
feet.
will be just.
So it says it looks like 11 feet I see here from the one corner. So it's. If
So I
that's the
said
case, 2.5
feet.
feet, so we're looking at. Or less. And corner, right? Well, this is marked
Excuse me.
11, so.
Sir, I'm totally good with you conferring. No, I'm totally good with it, as long as you're sworn. Okay, will you be sworn? Say your name for the record, please. Sorry, Rose, sorry to. Now you're good, go all day long. Okay.
Chairman.
No, it's, sorry.
So I was just trying to figure out, based upon here, looks like it's the corner of the shed closest to the house was marked 11 feet, and if you moved it 2.5 feet closer, so we're less than 10 feet. To your house, if we're, I'm not a math major, but I'm pretty sure that's less than 10 feet. Just checking.
And it, does that corner, rear corner of the shed, if you will, does that now rest on basically the property line?
Yes.
Okay.
We open for any general questions now, or are we specific
No,
to?
we're trying to limit it to
Her testimony.
her testimony, responses to what Mr.
Okay, well,
Greg.
my question, what time in the morning does your business begin with the dogs?
8 AM.
8 o'clock. So no one drops the dog off before 8 o'clock? No dogs go outside before 8 o'clock?
No, unless there's some kind of, emergency and I have video that I can watch in the kennel. If there's a dog that I feel is gonna have an accident or something, we'll see, I'll bring it up about something.
So they're not fed prior to 8 o'clock, there's no other, nothing starts before 8 o'clock. What about evening or the PM time? Do you have a stop point when?
7 PM.
7 PM. And are the dogs then let out after 7 o'clock?
7 PM is it. Lights out.
Okay, so
It had-
okay, so from 8 to 7, so for 13 hours, or sorry, 13 hours, there's no contact with the dogs are boarded, and that's what they stay for the night?
From 7 PM.
Till 8 o'clock. Okay, and they don't have any, their kennels or the boarding area that you put in, they have no egress, there's no access to their dog, they can go out like in a run, they can't go outside on their own or anything during that time? How would you describe the structures that the dogs stay in when they, from 7 PM until 8 in the morning? What do they stay in?
Right now, I have enclosures, which are kennels that are made of metal. Like 2.5 foot by 6 foot high metal panels that are attached by. Whatever they're attached by, and then they have doors on the front, so it's a 6 foot by 3 foot like run space for the smaller ones. And then I have larger ones that are about 4 by 6 foot. And then I have even larger ones. So that kind of depends on the size of the dog.
If it helps the board, there are some photographs in the exhibit that I introduced. There's 1 or 2 photographs of the holding, so I think the larger holding pens.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Anything else?
This time.
Okay.
Read like that. There's something brewing.
Ryan might have a question too.
The outside area. Is there any specific lighting?
I mean, at night, we can turn on the lights so that I can, see them open and pick it up.
What kind of lighting?
It's just a motion sensor light, so if I walk by on one of the sides where I walk them for their night walks, it turns on so that I can see.
Just like a spotlight on the side of your
It's a
house?
ring motion sensor light that I have attached to the back of the house.
So just one, not several?
I have one there, and then we also have some on the patio, which are just like the lantern lights that are on the pillars.
Decorative.
They're contractor lights, fixed floodlights, you turn on.
Any idea like what the wattage would be of the lights?
It's free. They're all separate.
I mean, what is that? I didn't hear you.
I don't know the wattage, sorry.
How long is Heather's Happy
Sales.
Sales been open for business?
I started out doing fostering, so it wasn't an actual, like paid business. I was also doing preschool teaching at that time. So it started out more of just like something I did on the side for the fosters that were adopted out who needed care and they wanted to come back and use me. But then it turned full-time after COVID was over with. And everybody, I had ran out and got a dog.
So your current level of activity dates to about 2020?
Yeah,
I have, if I may, Mr. Walsh, we could do as applicant too, I have the certificate of formation that was filed with the Department of State on April 26, 2022. Would you like that?
Well, I'm not necessarily interested in when the entity was formed. I'm interested in how long is the level of activity been going on at 765 North Lime County. If I heard your client's testimony correct, she said sometime in 2020. Okay.
And when you, let's say, going back to 2020, when you started converting from foster into actual business style, did you have all the facilities that you currently have, like the kennels and the outside run?
No, it has. More completely
How many dogs did you start?
3, at the most. Because my garage was just a garage. It wasn't turned into anything at that time. I was just having them in the house with us, family.
Sounds kind of strange. How many personal dogs do you have?
2.
Family dogs?
So those dogs are in the property in addition to the ones that are there.
Correct.
And they're not kept in the kennel area?
No,
Do you have employees or contractors that help you?
I do have a lady who comes 2 doors down and she helps me when I need some extra help. Or when my family and I go out to dinner or have an event or something.
So with, right on your same street?
Yes,
Fine.
she literally walks just through the properties and. She also works at Tiny Miracles. It's awesome.
Garage you referenced in your testimony that you just gave, could you explain that to me? Was it the existing garage of the house and it's been converted?
So the garage is a 2-car oversized garage
Attached?
attached. That we have access to from the inside of our house. There's a door that we can just walk into from our house. And then there's a door on the back. Of the garage that goes directly into the garage, and then there's the 2 front doors. When I got licensed by the state, they told me that I was no longer allowed to keep the dogs in the house with carpeting, that I need to have an impervious surface. So at that point, to get licensed to be official, we had to convert the garage, which is a cement floor, into the kennel space.
You now park a car in that garage?
No.
You said it was a 2-car garage?
Is it insulated?
The 2 doors, since a week and a half ago, are now insulated and closed off. I feel like that's probably where the barking was heard during the summertime when we open the doors for the first thing at 8 a.m. Everyone's excited, and until we get them outside. Once they're outside, my son brings them out to me and I'm out at the playtime. Because I don't want the dogs out there without anyone out there. So I wait out there, he brings them out. During that process, they do bark because they're excited. It's their first time I open the doors in the morning. And the 2 garage doors they were not insulated for the past couple years. And now they are, and it's wonderful. But I could definitely understand where it would get loud for that period of time when we're bringing them out.
Your house was built in about early 1970s? According to the Board of Assessment here in Bucks County, it says 1972. Does that sound right? And you've lived there how long?
For 18 years. It was a lease purchase.
When
I was
did you?
22 years old when I moved here.
Okay, so you've lived there for 18 years, which would put you at about 2005? And when did you buy it?
It was not quite a full year. We didn't do the full lease, for that year. I think we went to close on the house before that 1 year mark was up.
According to the same Board of Assessment record you're looking at, the sale date is referenced as September the 28th, 2006.
You used to be known as Heather Inverso?
Yes.
Spell that, please.
Inverso. Right, so you have lived there and you just lived there as a resident from 2006, as Mr. Gresh indicated, until 2020 was when the dog boarding resort kennel operation started in earnest.
Yes.
Okay.
You had stated that you take the dogs on a night walk. When does that occur?
About 6:30 we start.
6:30. So we either whether it's summer or winter at 6:30?
Yeah.
How many different dogs do you think that you've had in the last year?
Like in terms of like breed, size,
Just different individual dogs.
of different individual dogs.
Yeah.
So how the state calculates that is by each boarding. So for the past 2 years, I've consistently had around the 500 mark of boardings per year. Which calculates to like 3 dogs a day if you put it throughout that whole entire year per day. But I feel like I'm kind of busier during the summer and then I have not as busy times, so.
Anything further?
No, I think, Mr. Dudek, if you want to.
Actually. I might have, based upon Mr. Dudek's direct and the board's questions, I may have some follow-up. If you let me to wait until after.
Why don't
he's
you do
done.
that? Why don't you wait till like, since she's
That's
kind of rolling.
All right.
And Mr. Dudek, now we'll give you a little freer reign. since-
Okay. All right, I'll skip over the questions that have been asked and answered, okay? All right, Mr. Sandro, going back to your description of the lot, I wanted, is the new survey in yet or no? The current one, the corrected? Because if not, I'd like to make this applicant too. I have a copy for them.
Was this one?
Mr. Walsh, could I see Township Exhibit 1, please?
Hold on. Township.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Um. Okay, this is,
If you look in the lower right corner, this has a revision of 10/9/2022. This was Mr. Monteleone's last and most recent version. That's why I brought this. I know it's small.
no, it's actually. It's actually, we already.
Right, because the structures are still across the property line.
Well, this is, all right, then I gotta, then I don't, that doesn't have the revision date on it. The plan I have is already showed a revision date of a revision date of October 9th, 2023. That's the plan I marked as B4.
Yeah, A2 was included with the application.
And then B4 came in as an amended plan. And so that's the plan we marked as
Okay, B4 is the same as T2, our applicant 2, I'm sorry. That is the same. Sorry about that.
Okay, so why don't you, well, this is not. If you notice this, the one you marked, at least you handed me, it doesn't have.
Oh, yeah, this is the
revisions
old
in it.
one. That's the wrong one, sorry.
So let's just stick with B4 and skip A2 altogether.
All right, very good, thank you. Showing you a copy, Mr. Sandro, of what's already been admitted as B4. Is this the survey that you engaged Mr. Monteleone to perform?
Yes.
Okay, and in terms of the property, prior to the survey, where is it that you believe that the property line was with your neighbor to the north, that's 760 764 North Line Kiln. What did you believe to be the property line, for the both of you?
We believed it to be where we had both created the berm that was installed for water.
Okay, and is that berm indicated as a green line on the plan?
Correct.
Okay, so when you located the shed originally along the pink line, that is the actual property line, you didn't think you were crossing the property line because you both thought it was the berm, is that correct? Okay. Now, in terms of the property today, what's the surrounding area like? What's the property like to the south of you?
You can look it up on line, but it's a 0.64 acre lot
Okay.
that has a home in the front and then a couple other, it's like an apartment that's attached in the back.
Different sorts of structures and things like that? Would you describe it as a real clean looking lot?
Like,
Okay. All right, and what about the property to the north of you at 764? What's that like?
it's just wide open in the back.
Okay,
They have a rancher.
all right, what's to the rear of your property?
It's the larger house that's kind of further set up on her hill.
Okay, and you're on Limecombe Pike, is that correct? 152?
Correct.
Okay, it's a busy road,
Very.
is that correct? Okay, now in terms of the area around you, are there any other sort of home businesses or anything like that in the general area?
There's some that I'm aware of,
Okay, can you please tell the board where those are in relation to you?
across Limekiln Pike.
On Upper Stump Road?
Correct.
On the corner? That's the Shingler residence, right?
Correct.
What operates there?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
What operates there?
She runs from what I'm aware of, is a fitness
Fitness studio?
studio.
Okay. Are you aware of any other people in the area, like hairdressers or anything like that, that have people coming in?
There's another neighbor that does do hair,
Where is that located?
one other house up.
Are they the people who were here at the first hearing? Is that the same lady that opposed this application? She has a hair studio there? Okay, and that's on Limekiln Pike? Okay, are you aware of any other businesses in your general vicinity being operated on these properties? Okay. Okay. And then that's just in the general surrounding area, is that correct? And you've owned and operated Heather's Happy Tales as an LLC since approximately April 2022, right? Okay, and how would you describe your business? What is the business that you provide? Okay, and the pet sitting consists of what activity?
Over. Dog daycare.
Okay, do you do any of these other things that are defined as being a pet resort, such as grooming and spa services? Do you do any training? Any rehabilitation therapy? Any swim therapy? Massage? And is the exercise and socialization of pets part of the doggy daycare or separate? And in terms of the traffic on 152, how many cars a day come to your property as a result of Heather's Happy Tales?
Is about, I have 2 to 3 regulars that come, 2 to 3 days a week. So they drop off, in the morning, so that's maybe 3 to 4 drop offs every morning.
And then in the evening, any pickups?
Yes,
The same amount?
yeah,
Okay, and is that during the week or the weekend as well?
the daycare is just for during the week. I don't really do much daycare for the weekends. More than 4 days.
And that's a drop off on Friday and pick up on Sunday or Monday?
Yes,
What's the latest pickup time? Okay, and the earliest drop off time? And how did this business turn into what it is today? How can you describe that for the board, how it began and how it has come to its current existence?
Oh, I feel like I kind of did, but we started out with the fostering and then it led into doing the pet sitting, and then during COVID, nobody did anything at all. It was just a complete standstill because no one.
Are you familiar with the application of Rover?
Yes,
What is Rover?
Rover is an app that anyone can download to find pet sitters in the area.
Are you aware of pet sitters in your area that offer what you offer?
Yeah.
Let me show you. How is what you offer any different from what's offered through these people on Rover?
I mean, when the lady comes out to do her checks, she does let me know of other places that are in the area that do something similar, and I've never heard her mention that there is any other pet sitters that are licensed by the state. What I was made aware of is that if you even accept money for one dog and you're babysitting one dog, you have to be licensed by state law. So that's why I got the state licensure. I don't know whether any of these other pet sitters are licensed by the state.
Okay.
Um,
You said you have a B2 kennel license?
Yes.
Do you consider yourself a kennel?
No.
Why aren't you a kennel?
I mean, by kennel definition, it's the ones that are indoor, outdoor. So they're actual cement slabs that have to have special drainage and they have to have access to indoor, outdoor space.
Is that what you have?
No,
Would that be typical of a larger operation?
I would think so.
Okay. And then in terms of this, are you familiar with Pet Resort in New Britain Township?
Yeah.
How are you familiar with that?
I refer people to them if I'm really.
Okay, and they're located over on Schoolhouse Road, is that correct?
Yeah.
And that's in the, did you know that's in the industrial district of the township, right? Did you know that? All right, have you ever been in Pappy's Pet Resort?
Yeah.
How does Pappy's Pet Resort, which is an actual licensed pet resort, compare to what you offer?
I haven't actually walked through, I've been into the storefront, which when you walk in, it's set up like a store and then you can check your dog in and then they're taken back to the kennel spaces. So the regular public doesn't actually have access to walk through the kennel spaces.
Do you have like a store or something like that in the property?
A what?
A store?
A store? No.
Okay, what's the turnover of your clientele?
The turnover.
Yeah, like, I mean, are you always getting, is it a regular customer base?
They had for a couple years.
How many clients are we talking about?
About 50.
And are they always, are all 350 always using you?
No, I mean, maybe at one point during the year when their family takes their vacation in the summer or whenever they take vacation, they'll reach out.
But if you say you have 350 clients and the most dogs you ever have on there is like 15, how do you reconcile those two numbers?
Because a lot of families just go away for 5 days a year.
Okay, so you're saying they might be your client once during the whole year.
Yeah,
So not.
like-
Okay, then that's what I was asking. What's your regular daycare? About 3 to 4?
Yeah, 2 to 3 days a week.
Okay, what's your regular boarding plan?
It fluctuates depending on if it's a holiday weekend, I might be busier because more families are going away for 3 or 4 days. But the average is from 6 to 8-ish, and then maybe busier on the weekends.
So 3 to 4 for the doggy daycare, 6 to 8 for the boarding regularly?
Well, collective total, even with the boarding and the doggy daycare is the 6 to 8 for the weekdays, and then maybe 6 to 10 for the weekends.
Oh, okay. So that one number includes the other number?
Yes,
What number includes which number? To be clear.
I just make it, it's all just doggy daycare and boarding in my mind are the same thing.
Okay, and that average number per week is what?
Is 6 to 8.
Now, in terms of the actual business itself, you said you have one person that helps you?
Yes,
That's a non-family member?
yes,
Do you have any family members who assist?
yes, my son,
Who is that?
Mason.
Okay, how old is he?
He's 18 years old now.
Okay. And other than Mason and the woman who lives up the road, is there anybody else?
No.
What, now, we were talking about the plan and you had mentioned some changes that have been made. One thing you mentioned was having moved the shed toward closer to the house and away from the property line. Is that correct? All right. What about fencing? Has any fencing changed on here?
This fence will be taken down as soon as we install.
You say this fence,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's been my question.
All the way in the back, shaded in green, the larger dog play area.
There was that fence is going to be removed?
Well, no, not the entire fence, just the side that goes onto the neighbor's.
Is the north side of it?
Yes,
And you mentioned that the pond to the north of that has been filled in, is that correct? Okay, it shows on here you have an above ground pool, is that correct? You don't have a below ground pool?
No.
Okay. You have a basketball court, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And in that basketball court, is that indicated where? It's the pink square?
yeah, it's like right between the two walkways that go out to the dog play area.
And there's a second area in the back in green to the south of the large area. What's that second area? And
That's this,
is that completely fenced in?
it's got wood that just has mulch in between. The larger area is just mulched in, and then where you see the gates is the actual gated play area.
Okay, but I'm asking you, is the play area, is this enclosed?
But by enclosed, you mean, is it? It's
Fenced in.
Yes,
It's fenced in?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay. All right. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had done some insulation in the garage, is that correct?
just the two front doors so far.
Okay, have you also considered if this use were to be allowed somehow, soundproofing the entire inside of the garage?
Yes, I have received a quote on doing the complete soundproofing,
And that's something you would do?
absolutely.
Okay, I have the estimate. Can I provide the estimate as
Sure. But
applicant?
two, 18.
Thanks. Well,
A2 is an estimate from Baracelli Construction
Yep,
to Fred DeSandro, who is also been sworn as a witness.
And it's your testimony that this is an additional step you would take to minimize the impact of this business upon the surrounding area, is that correct?
yes.
Now, other than any kind of financial impact, I mean, what unnecessary hardship you believe would result if Heather's Happy Tails were to cease operations as you've described them to the board this evening?
A hardship in terms of like how it would affect my ability to
Well, I mean, like,
pay our bills
well, no,
or,
other than the financial, like, who's your customer base? What makes you different from a kennel or a pet resort that these people in the community buy it? What's the hardship? Why do they come to you?
Overruled.
What's,
I have considered trying to see how this would be made possible for my base outside of my home, and it wouldn't, because I have dogs that are older, some are in diapers, they take medications during you know, the day and then they need to be monitored at night. The whole reason my clientele comes to me is because I'm in my home, because I can be there and I can watch them. I'm sorry.
So
If you need a break, Mr. Sandro, that's fine.
you want a break? Or you want me to give you a different question? All right, let me ask you a different.
We can take a 5-minute break if you'd like.
Want to take a 5-minute break?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, so in terms of the boarding and the dog and daycare that you provide versus what a larger commercial operation provides, what is the hardship that will result to these customers and clientele and these dogs in particular? Why so?
They would just have to find another home sitter.
So they just go to somebody else to do the same thing? Right. After you received the township's enforcement notice for the permitted improvements, you did engage Mr. Monteleone to do the survey, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and is that when you found out the property lines to the north were different than you and your neighbor thought?
yes.
Okay, why did you build the shed in that location as it stands today, as opposed to outside of the 15-foot required area?
So the shed was delivered by the Amish, through our backyard. And got stuck halfway through our backyard. And
Why did
then-
it get stuck?
Because it gets wet.
Okay, so when we look at the survey, is a lot of your lot wet to the left of the house?
Yes, and this is why we had to do a lot of the improvements that you see on here, like the raised driveway. The pool had to be put onto a base so that it wasn't just, sinking into the ground or sloping. The doggy play area has the wood chips because it would get just covered, the dogs would get covered in mud. So the shed was brought through, got stuck, sat in our backyard for months, and then we had to build a base that was up higher on the land on this side. We decided this with our neighbor. We all talked about it, where we think it should go. And then we built the base with the crushed stone. And then the Amish had to come back and then bring it up and put it on the base.
Why didn't you seek a permit for this shed?
Because I'm an idiot. I literally didn't think that it needed a permit. I thought that when I got the shed, they would say, okay, where's your permit for the shed? I had another shed previous to this and my neighbor bought it and he came and picked it up and moved it over to his sheds. And my other neighbor has 2 other sheds in the front. And I just truly wasn't aware that I had to go and get a permit for a shed.
So you weren't trying to purposely avoid the permitting process?
No.
And if the board were to permit you to have a variance to keep the shed in its relocated position off of the property line so that it's not trespassing, would you, as a condition of that, go and get a permit application for the shed?
Yeah.
To make sure that it's structurally sound and everything else, right, and that you pay the necessary fee? Okay. In terms of the driveway impervious surface, right? You mentioned something about having 2 other drivers in the house, is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, now when you bought the lot back in 2006, what was the condition of the lot in terms of the hard surfaces there?
In relation to the driveway, so.
Well, just in general, I mean, Mr. Monteleone, he identifies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas that constitute existing impervious surface. First is the house, obviously that was, all right? Is that a yes?
Yes,
Okay, you added the basketball court?
yes,
Okay, and that's 527 square feet only, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and how about the concrete walks, pavers and fire pit area, were they there already? So you added 852 square feet there, correct?
yes,
Okay, the shed is 263 square feet of impervious surface, right?
yes,
Okay, and then you have some walls and stepping stones that come to about 117 square feet, correct?
yes,
Okay, and then the driveway. That's the largest, which is 4,600
and 44 square feet, or 10.27% of your total lot area, right?
Yes,
And by the way, if I look at the zoning data on here, the minimum lot size for the watershed district is 80,000 square feet, right? Right? Do you know that? Okay, but I'm saying, did you see that the zoning data he put here was 80,000 square feet,
Objection, the document speaks for itself.
Overruled.
right? And your lot is only 45,000 square feet, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because you were cited, one of the things that it said in the notice of violation was that your lot is about 46,609 square feet, but it's actually even smaller. It's 45,235 square feet, right? Is that correct? So you already have an undersized lot that you already had a driveway on when you got there, is that correct? How much of the driveway did you pave after you bought the property in 2006?
when I got my 2 new drivers, we put on. It's pretty much this little bubble so that they'd be able to turn around instead of having to back out onto Limekiln Pike, which
Okay,
is my worst nightmare.
so you added the paved surface for safety reasons so they could safely get out onto 152.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I noticed also on here that in terms of the driveway itself, that's part of it. The minimum front yard setback is 100 feet, and you're back 141 feet, is that correct? All right, so what's in front of you, this black area going underneath the driveway there? What is all that?
It's the water that runs down 152 and then curves into our yard and kind of comes around and then eventually makes its way through.
Okay,
So it's stone.
okay, so that's stone. Okay, so the driveway had to cross over that whole area in order to get to your house, is that correct?
Yes,
And that was there when you bought it in 2005?
yes.
Were you aware, did anybody make you aware of any impervious surface violations at that time when you bought it in 2005?
No.
Okay. So you only, since then, the only impervious surface in terms of the driveway you added is this little turnaround part, is that correct?
So yes, this kind of the oval shape of the driveway. Was the most recent add-on.
Okay, you know how much square feet that added specifically? You have an estimate? No idea?
Like how many feet out was it from the driveway? It was like, what, 20 by 50 feet? What's that? That math.
Well, let's talk about the shape. It looks like it's a semicircle.
Yeah,
So if it's got what's the diameter of that semicircle? Well, or the radius, either one. Don't you know the area of a circle? Pi r squared, you can take half of it, right?
Yeah.
So what's the rate, what is, if I'm standing in the middle of where that paving started horizontally, and if I look to my right or left to the edge of it, how far is the distance? All right, so it's 20 feet, that's the radius, right?
According to the plan, scale is 1 inch equals 20 feet. We're looking at that area, that's
More than an inch.
that's
So it's about 628 feet. 630 feet of paving that you put in? Does that sound about right?
Square feet? Square footage?
That's what area is.
Right, okay.
sounds about right.
Okay,
So how I calculated that was exactly like my high school geometry. Which radius is 20, pi r squared is the area of a circle, and then I divided it by 2. I only took the 3.14.
Great, thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
Yes,
Appreciate that.
professor, I prefer.
They strike that to the record.
Stop it. Mr. Mumbles over there.
And same question with respect to the impervious surface. If the board were to recognize that, not having this surface to allow the turnaround so that your kids can safely enter 152, if they were allowed to have this variation of 18% of the total lot instead of the 12 that's permitted on this undersized lot, would you nonetheless seek the necessary permit for the driveway?
Yeah.
Would you also to make sure that any stormwater management facilities required under section 26-121 of the township stormwater ordinance were satisfied?
I knew that would entail. and
Right.
they-
Right. Okay, so you would at least see what that involves, right?
Yeah.
To ensure that you're not increasing the water runoff beyond what's designed for the watershed district, is that correct?
Yeah.
You would take reasonable measures to accommodate any increase above the 12%, correct? Okay. I think that's all I have for Mr. Sandro in terms of our case.
I have further questions.
We'll let Mr. Gresham. have his way.
Okay,
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, you said. First of all, I just want to. You testified about something just a few moments ago, maybe half an hour ago. In your mind, daycare and boarding are the same thing. I believe you said that, right?
You have to answer.
Yes,
Isn't daycare watching dogs just strictly during the day?
yes,
And then boarding is when they stay overnight, right?
yes,
Now, I understand you provide the same service. If a dog is at your facility during the day, you provide it the same services, whether it's only there for the day or it stays overnight, correct? But you do understand that you provide both daycare and boarding services, right? Okay. You mentioned about Patty's Pet Resort. You've been in there, right?
I haven't been through their entire facility.
But you've been to the facility.
Yes,
It's a big commercial building on Schoolhouse Road, right? Not a house, right?
No.
And it's not a residential area, right? There's a tree care facility next door, right?
yes,
Okay. Am I correct, ma'am, that when you, around COVID, as you mentioned to the solicitor, when you decided to take on this work full time? You'd never done it before to that scale, is that right? So when you decided to do it, you had to do a lot of research to figure out how to do it right? Okay, that's where you told me before about the belt that you wear to make sure the dogs don't run away, right? You had to research that to find out the best practices on how to do that, right?
yes,
And you had to research what kind of cages or coops or kennels you wanted to put into the garage to make sure you were giving the dogs enough space, right? And giving them enough place to run around and be in their own space, correct?
Yes.
And I'm sure you had to research what kind of food you were going to feed them and how often to feed them and how much water to give them and all of those things, right? And you probably did some research looking at how much you could reasonably charge for these services, right? So you looked at other people that were involved in pet resorts and doggy daycares and the like, and you compared your services to theirs and you adjusted your prices to suit, correct?
off of Rover, yes.
Okay, off rope. And then you had to research how to get that, the permit that you got. You said you got that from the dog warden? Is that Ms. North? Is that right? Vernon North?
Yeah.
Okay, so you had to research how to get that permit, right? And you had to go online or make some phone calls and you had to find who Vernon North was and how to get a hold of her, right? And then you had to make an application to her, go through all of that, and then get that piece of paper, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you did all of that research. You learned how to make yourself into a pet resort, but you didn't do any research to find out if you were able to do it on your property, right? Okay. Am I correct that the shed is still encroaching upon the property line with your neighbor's property? As of right now, tonight, it's still partially on your neighbor's property, right? Okay. Likewise, the exercise facility that you have installed for larger dogs, the big one in the back of your property. Likewise, that encroaches significantly upon your neighbor's property, right?
Yes.
And I believe you testified earlier that you plan on taking that fence down. I assume you're gonna put up a new fence along the property.
Yes, correct.
Would you also agree with me that based upon your understanding of the ordinances we've discussed tonight, that that shed that's currently on your neighbor's property line, there's no space between your house and that property line where that shed could legally exist without this board's approval? You agree with that?
What is the feet away from the house that it needs to be?
It's 15.
15. So my one solution is that if we build out the base, since there's not room on the front and it goes on a diagonal, the property line,
Mhm.
I could build it out by 4 feet, the base, and then fill that in with crushed stone and then have it lifted and moved forward by 4 feet, and then it would be off of the property line, but not closer to the house.
But it would still be within 15 feet of the property line and or the house, right?
It would still be within 15 feet of the property line, yes.
And that's the shed. That's just, I think you said the Amish delivered that shed.
Yes.
And then you realized that it was sinking or it wasn't level or there was something with the stormwater runoff. So you had to put some 6x6s underneath to lift it up and make sure it stayed dry and level, right? So when you did that, you had to research where to find the shed and do all those things, right? But you didn't pull any permits for the shed or research how to do that, right? You mentioned, you showed us a quote for soundproofing the garage, almost $24,000. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
What's the point in the soundproofing?
To ensure that when I'm starting my morning bring out of all the dogs, when they are making that noise because they're excited, that it won't be heard by neighbors.
Okay. Didn't you testify earlier tonight that they typically only bark once the door opens and your son is bringing them out to the exercise yard?
Yes.
Okay, so when the door's open, you could soundproof that room all day. The door's still open and when the neighbors are still gonna hear those dogs, right?
Well, the one door in the back is just one door that open and shuts, so you would just hear the barking. You would out the back,
Mhm.
but there's not neighbors out of the back that would potentially hear that really clearly because they're so far away from the back. So if you're standing in our like front driveway, you can't really hear them as much as, you would if the door was on the front and it was opening, shutting from the front.
What do you do with the waste from the animals
I throw it out in the trash.
in regular trash?
Yeah, I called the trash company and I asked them, do I need to do anything special? Do I have to have a special pickup for this?
Right.
It's a substantial, it's not just, my 2 dogs.
Mhm.
And they said, put it in a plastic bag and that's how we want you to dispose of it.
But you didn't check the zoning ordinance to see if there was anything specific you had to do in there, right?
For trash.
For the animal waste specifically. That's all I have. Thank you.
So that was to piggyback on that, so we've already ascertained and established that your property is in the watershed district. So there's obviously concerns with, what do we do with the urine? If you have all these dogs, if they go to the bathroom inside overnight between 7 PM and 8 in the morning. How do you handle that?
Accidents can happen and they're cleaned up with paper towels and disposed of.
So you don't hose anything down, there's nothing
No.
that has to be cleaned out and sanitized in a sense of the facility?
Everything is cleaned and sanitized every single day. After they're brought out for playtime and they're out at the play group, everything is cleaned every day. But it's not hosed, it's not power washed, it's not done like that because it's not likely that they have an accident overnight. But because of, dog viruses, I sanitize every day.
The waste products, where do you store them?
I have like a trash can that I dump it into, and then when that bag gets full, I tie it up and I put it into the trash
Outside, inside?
outside.
Sandra, the house looks like in the southwest corner of it, next to the deck, says septic tank. You see that? So is the drain field or the mound or whatever is where that tank leads to, is that south of that tank?
So the drain field is along. It's on the other side of. So where it says. Stepping stones, where that comes out to, and where it says septic tank. Like this. Both side of the yard here is septic drain field.
So that's why you didn't put the shed in that area?
That's a good reason to not put it there.
One of the things the board has to consider is if you looked at all alternative places to locate the improvement that would comply with the zoning ordinance, and just without seeing an area marked drain field or mound, I'm assuming because of the age of your house, it's either on a drain field or a mound. Without seeing that mark there, the first thing I would think, okay, well, possibly that's where the shed could go. But when I saw septic tank, then I saw a big open field. I put two and two together. So that septic field, your testimony is that it pretty much runs from the back wall, or at least the extended plane of the back wall of the house, not the deck, but the back wall has to effectively the rear lot line.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. What way does the property's grade run? Is it like where's the high ground, where's the low
So-
ground?
High level, and then the lowest would be.
In the front,
In the front, yeah.
where
left.
the dry creek, where the dry drainage ditch is? Okay, so the water runs from your rear lot line to your front?
Yeah.
Okay,
And so the berm takes the water from the back to the front to the rock swale. So that it doesn't run onto the neighbor's property. Oh, your property. Oh, okay, so it's coming from there. So then the neighbor's property is higher than yours. Okay, got it.
to your knowledge, Mr. Sandro, there has never been any stormwater management facility that you're aware of installed on your property. The only one you really have is that conveyance ditch, which looks to appear either have naturally occurred or it's been there for quite a while.
Yeah,
Okay. You looked into an area of the property of where you could potentially put an infiltration system or some kind of stormwater management facility?
and have it, still be able to run off
Anywhere?
is the goal for stormwater management, for it to be able to sit the water?
That's one of the goals, yeah.
On your property.
If it sits, sometimes you want it to percolate into the ground eventually. If it sits, you want it to drain out slowly. So you control what's called.
I mean, these two beds could potentially be made, wider, to hold.
I'm not asking if you're that design person. I'm
Yeah.
simply asking, have you consulted or talked to anyone with expertise in the field about,
The guy gave me his expertise.
okay, what did he say?
He said or, you know, if they did want to do some kind of runoff, he said it would make the most sense that it would be near most of the impervious surface, which is your driveway, which would be kind of that rock area that you were just talking about.
So he was identifying somewhere in the front for possible control.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
You have a license from, like, lack of a better word, dog warden. Do you need any other kind of licenses from like Department of Health or anything? Since we were referring to the waste.
They are the Department of Agriculture, the dog law enforcement. That is a Department of Agriculture. But I don't know of any other licenses in relation to health that I needed to get.
Do you, speaking of health, do you require any vaccinations or certifications
Yes.
from the dog owners?
Yes, when she comes out to do her unannounced checks, she wants to see the rabies certificate, not just a printout from your vet, with the actual certificate, with the serial number. And different information for each and every dog, and it must be up to date for every single dog in my care. I also personally require that they're up to date on their Bordetella, their influenza, and every other vaccine that's required for their age.
What happens at the dog hydrant?
What happened to the dog hydrant?
What happens there?
Oh, lots of pee. Do they say the dog hydrant?
It says dog hydrant. Well, it says dog HYD. Forgive me if I'm assuming that that's an abbreviation for hydrant.
No, the two of them are it's a cement statue. They're just for fun.
Right there and right there.
By the driveway.
Are they used for peeing? Well, I'm looking at dog hydrant, I'm thinking peeing, and it's right next to the drainage, and you got a lot of dogs coming through, so we've got urine runoff into the water space.
Take the dog, go around out.
Okay.
And he doesn't want any heat on. I'm threatened about.
Where's the
We
dog,
went to the-
where's the dog hydrant out back then?
It's outside the back door when we first come out, along one of the walls. I don't know if he reflected that one.
I don't see it.
By the fire pit? Crossing the fire
Yes, yeah, it's like right next to that fire pit.
So still over next to the fire pit, there's still a decent amount of urine in that wet area that's carried off.
I mean, that area has a walkway that is enclosed with four by fours, and then there's mulch in between the 4x4s, just so they're a little cleaner in like that high traffic area.
So sits in a bed of wood bark mulch, which is kind of cleaned and replaced often.
Okay. I don't see one in the back, so I only saw the one.
By the fire pit, yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah,
To the right of the path, I don't know if it's on that.
it's not on here,
Okay.
but it goes in the mulch and the mulch is replaced.
Yeah.
Routinely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sandra,
Not that way, easy. It's constantly kept clean.
Thank you.
Did you need any federal permits or just from the state?
It's
Just from the state, nothing from the
Yeah.
federal? Understood. Okay. Okay, anything further?
We rest.
Rest, you've concluded with your cross?
Yes.
Do you have any signage out there?
I did have some signage that said, doggy owners, please stay in your car and send me a text message.
Well, I meant like advertising signs, like.
Oh,
on-
Business sign like Heather's.
Any closing?
If I may,
Of course.
thank you. May I remain seated?
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
As long as you project.
I will. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all very much for allowing us to present our case here tonight in terms of the violation notices that were issued by the township on July 7th, 2023. With respect to the notice regarding the use, we believe that the case law provides that the zoning ordinance must be construed as written. And the zoning ordinance construed as written defines a pet resort as being all of those things. It doesn't say and or, it says all of those things, and that list is inclusive. And you would have to interpret the ordinance differently. But when it's written that way, it's written in favor of the least restrictive use on the landowner. And what we've shown here is that she has some doggy daycare and some boarding that doesn't rise to the New Britain Township zoning ordinance's definition under A9 of what a pet resort is. She wasn't cited for having a kennel. She was only cited for having a pet resort. And so we believe that the enforcement notice should be dismissed or denied or appeal sustained in that regard. Because the ordinance as written doesn't match the evidence that we received tonight as to kinds of services being offered there. There was no grooming, there was no rehabilitation, no massage, no therapy like that. There was no training. It was just boarding and doggy daycare, part of which included the socialization and exercise. So we believe, just as a matter of law, based upon the incontrovertible evidence, that the zoning violation for the use should be in our favor. If, however, you believe that, you know, if you dismiss the zoning enforcement notice, where does it leave you? It leaves you with her not having to put in the soundproofing. It leaves you with her not having to do anything more, which is maybe why a variance would be a better way, because then you could attach some conditions to it to ensure that there is no detriment to the public. She could do the soundproofing. She could make sure that the amount of dogs is restricted to her max of 15. There are certain conditions, I think, if the board recognizes this as being a good case for a use variance, where we show that with these conditions in place, it wouldn't adversely affect the public health, safety and welfare, would be an appropriate relief. And especially in light of the fact that we're not just talking about unnecessary hardship being income related. If these dogs that look for a smaller, more intimate area don't go to her, they're just going to somebody else. They're just going somewhere else. It's not like you're going to stop the need for it. It's not like it's going to change anything. So the unnecessary hardship is you have these dogs. She said it's been a repeat clientele for 2 to 3 years of, this has been like their home for a while now, you know? So I think the unnecessary hardship could at least be supported, and then it gives the board some control over the conditions. Whereas if you look at that enforcement notice and you look at that definition, you have to find in our favor. That's an inclusive definition. It says and. They could have drafted or, they could have said pet resort shall be any one of 2 of the 3 following. It shall be either 3 or the 4. It didn't. It has to be all 10 of those categories, and it has to be in our favor.
Because that's what the zoning ordinance provides. It says it's these 10. And she's only 2. So that enforcement knows it's not a pet resort. It's a doggy daycare. That's not prohibited there. It's a boarding. That's not prohibited. The use is pet resort. And this is not a pet resort. So I think at least if the board considers the use variance, and at least put some controls in going forward so that she has to make sure that it's soundproof and takes other measures. Whereas if the zoning ordinance is interpreted as written, there's no control. There's no control because the enforcement notice has to be dismissed. In terms of the dimensions, these are just dimensional variances, obviously not a use variance, so that it's the Hellsberg standard and not something significant. It's a little more forgiving in terms because, we're not talking about the prohibited use. Both she and her neighbor thought that the property line was where that berm was, and the other areas of the lot couldn't accommodate the shed. She had a contractor put it in, and no mention was mentioned of a shed. I think that Miss Sandra throughout tonight, I think she testified rather candidly. She's not been trying to avoid responsibility. She's here and trying to do the responsible thing. And we would hope that the shed in this location, so long as it doesn't encroach upon the neighboring lot, is it de minimis, it's within 15 feet of the house. I'm not sure what the point is that you have to have a shed more than 15 feet from your house. But if there's some sort of danger or something other than aesthetics being caused by a shed being that close to the house, I'm not seeing it. So I'm hoping that the board will find that the location of the shed, so long as it doesn't encroach, it would be an unnecessary hardship to try to relocate that on any other portion of the property as outlined, through a testimony requested by Mr. Walsh. We have the drainage field to the south along the southern property. And then in the back there, we have the flooding that comes from the top forward. So they put it in the best area they could to store what they have on the property that isn't related to the business. She also said she would apply for the permit to ensure it's structurally sound and everything else that needs to be ensured through the permitting process. I don't believe there's a permit requirement for the above ground pool. Basketball court, it's not permitted, but I guess she would have to see if there's a permit required for that. And she said she would be going to do that. And then finally, in terms of the impervious surface, we have a 45,000 acre square foot lot, and an 80,000 minimum square foot district that was basically slapped on top of this lot after the lot existed. The lot was built in 72. I'm pretty sure the watershed district didn't even exist in 72 because I think Galena was just started around that time. So you have a non-conforming undersized lot that has to cross over all of this water traffic along 152. So that's already taking your setback 140 feet from 100 feet. So that's already increasing the driveway by 40, pushing it back that far. You have safety concerns getting out onto 152, which is just a nightmare. So they put in a little bit more driveway so that the kids could turn around there. They'd still need that turnaround even if the garage was usable. They still have to back up and get out onto there in order to safely enter onto 152. So we're hoping that if we could put the permit in process and then investigate any kind of stormwater impact, because we're only talking 18% versus 12%. It's only a 6% difference to see what that would be in terms of the stormwater management impact. Ms. Sandro indicated she'd be willing to ensure that she does investigate that to see what that 6% difference means. If it's 12%, she wouldn't need any. But it's 6% more. It's at 18 versus 12. So I think if the board is willing to grant the variance to allow the impervious surface as it exists, one condition would be that we undertake the reasonable investigation and measures necessitated by the stormwater management, which may be a holding area in the front. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I don't know what 6% would mean in terms of additional, but it's I think something within the board's discretion to ensure that,
this 6% variance is accounted for. So they're request remaining.
Anything further?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Resch, you have any final closing comments?
Yes, thank you. I never thought I'd get the opportunity to argue in favor of the Oxford comma. And here we are. Mr. Dudick would have you read the A13 use as including an Oxford comma between the word exercise and the word and in the very last line of the definition. Massage, comma, exercise, comma, and socialization of pets. If that comma existed there, I might agree with Mr. Dudick's interpretation of the definition. Because it would be clear that the and was conjunctive and inclusive, and that each of those individual uses had to exist in order for you to find that this is a pet resort. But it's not there. Not only is it not there, but the conjunctive and is used earlier in the definition several times. Facilities routinely used for daily and overnight boarding of pets. There's an and, no comma. Later on, grooming and spa services. There's an and, no comma. And then at the end, exercise and socialization of pets. The applicant told you herself that the whole reason why people bring the pets to her is for exercise and socialization, not exercise and then separately socialization. They're together. The conjunctive and is used 3 times, at least in this definition, to show that those 2 things are related, exercise and socialization. That being said, this ordinance on its face is clear that you do not need each of those things to be present in order to establish a pet resort use. It's made clear in subsection 3, where the ordinance defines separate capacities for each of the different uses. Maximum of 80 pets in daycare, maximum of 60 pets in boarding, a daily maximum of 30 pets for grooming and other purposes. The ordinance itself is written in such a way to itemize each of those individually and allow for them each individually. Therefore, combined with the reading of the definition as I just went through with you, it's clear that the property in question meets the definition of a pet resort. Now, in furtherance of some of the questions that were asked by the board in regard to the use that's currently being made of the property, I'd call your attention to paragraph 9 of subsection 3 of that section. That's 27-305. Animal waste shall be collected and disposed of in containers and removed from the facility by a septic hauler and disposed of at a properly licensed waste disposal facility. All conditional use applications for a pet resort shall specify the proposed collection and storage facilities for animal waste and identify coverage and impermeability of collection facilities and length of storage time before disposal. Proof of the septic hauler and proper disposal and compliance with the Bucks County Department of Health shall be submitted at the time of the hearing. Further, this is a separate subsection, subsection 12. At least one member of the board and also your solicitor specifically asked about federal licensing. I quote, all pet resorts shall obtain licensing from the United States Department of Agriculture and successfully meet any and all inspections by the USDA and successfully complete any and all inspections by the USDA. You haven't heard any evidence of that. In fact, the applicant specifically testified that she was not aware of any federal regulations at all. So she certainly can't be compliant with them, whatever they are. Now, it's clear that this is a pet resort use. It's clear that they're in violation of that use definition. Primarily because the property already possesses a primary use, namely a single-family detached dwelling. The applicant testified she lives there with her husband and her children, her 2 dogs, and then they have this business there. Under our zoning ordinance, under any zoning that I've ever heard of, you're not allowed 2 primary uses. Certainly, you're not allowed it here in New Britain Township. They're already making it a primary use as a single-family dwelling. You're being asked to find and sustain the appeal that this is not a pet resort. Fine. Assuming arguendo that you make that finding. It has not been presented to you tonight what variance is being sought, what use variance is being sought for the applicant to continue making the use of the property that she is using. She stated she's not a kennel. She does not agree that she's a pet resort. What is she? Because none of the permitted uses, primary uses by right, have been presented tonight. There already is a primary use. None of the residential accessory uses listed in the ordinance have been presented to you tonight. None of the general accessory uses and structures have been advocated to you tonight. None of the uses permitted by special exception have been argued to you tonight. As of right now, we don't know what variance for use the applicant is asking for. They're just asking you for a variance. The problem is they have presented no evidence to you of any substantial hardship of any kind relevant to this case. The substantial hardship we heard testified about is, well, if you deny this use and they're not allowed to use pet resort, kennel, call it whatever you will, that those dogs and those families that bring those dogs to this facility will have to go somewhere else. The problem is that the law doesn't care if it's a substantial hardship to someone else. I would submit to you that that's not a substantial hardship anyway. Because as Mr. Dudek already pointed out to you, those dogs can just go somewhere else. That's not a hardship. But it's certainly not a hardship to this applicant. There's been no evidence presented tonight of any kind that the denial of this use places an undue hardship on the applicant. Further, the standards for a use variance also require that the variance has to enable a reasonable use of the property. The property is already subject to a reasonable use, namely a single family dwelling, because that's how it's being used. That's how it had been used from 1972 until 2020, when the applicant decided to open her business. There is insufficient evidence of this record, even assuming that you sustain the appellant's appeal in regard to the zoning enforcement act concerning the pet resort. There is insufficient evidence of record here for you to establish a legal right to a use variance of any kind. As to the dimensional variances, council stipulated, the applicant stipulated that all of those dimensional issues that are cited in P15 are present. They're absolutely correct. You've been told by both parties here that those conditions exist. You've even heard that they tried to move the shed, and the shed was moved, and it's still on the neighbor's property line, even after it was moved. And the only suggestions you've been given as to why a variance should be allowed for those dimensional, first of all, before I get to the variances, there's no evidence to show this board that you should not deny the appeal concerning the dimensional issues raised in the zoning enforcement. They were presented, they were stipulated to, they were not denied in any way. We must uphold the zoning enforcement notice regarding the dimensional issues. There's been insufficient evidence presented to you that the applicant is entitled to a dimensional variance for any of those issues. There's been no allegation of any significant hardship concerning, again, the use of the property, concerning, again, where that shed needs to be located. All you've been told is, well, if you give us a variance, we'll apply for permits. We weren't trying to not apply. I accept that. I do. But the applicant was clear that everything else that she had to do to start this business, she researched it in detail and she figured out the right way to do it. We're only here tonight because they got caught. And I understand that. This applicant is not the first that happens to. It won't be the last. I don't hold anything against the applicant here. I understand what they're trying to do. And it sounds by all factors that we've heard that they do a good job taking care of these animals. That's not the issue before you. The issue before you is whether or not they are in violation of our zoning ordinance. And if they are, whether or not they've shown you sufficient evidence for you to excuse that for a legal basis. They've not done so. You must deny the appeals as to both enforcement actions, and you must deny the application for variance in all cases. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, please.
All right, we're gonna go off the record. Board's gonna retire to the anterior room here to deliberate. Just go back on one second. Yes, I did want to note that the board occasionally will receive through its zoning officer, individuals send emails, they send letters. We customarily do not accept these for party status purposes, but we do mark them as part of the record. There were two received for neighbors, and the reason we don't receive them for party status or for testimonies is because nobody's here to cross-examine them about statements that are made in it. But we will mark them as part of the record, and we'll mark those as B17. If anybody wishes to see them, they will be part of the record.
Okay. Be part of the board's consideration?
No, like I said, they're part of the record, but the
Part of
board
the
doesn't
record.
consider it because there's nobody here to put the testimony on, cross-examine it. But we don't, that's why I'm doing it at the tail end here.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, the board,
We have completed our deliberation.
board deliberated and this is the motion I will frame. The board first upholds both notices of violation. D14 as clarified that it's only the A13 pet resort use. The applicant was not cited for an A9 commercial kennel use. Secondly, denying the use variance for a related pet resort use. No second principal use is allowed on the property. Thirdly, denying the shed setback variance from the side lot line as well as the building separation distance. There's a caveat to that one. And fourthly, approve the impervious surface variance. And along with that, it includes the impervious surface that goes with the shed. If the shed can be relocated or investigated for being relocated into an area of the property that hasn't been looked at yet, such as where the dog pet resort use improvements are, then perhaps it can be relocated there. If it can't be because that's investigated, the board is not prejudicing your right to refile a second application to have the shed placed in the same spot where you'd like it now, but with a further developed record on why it couldn't go in some alternative spot on the property. And Mr. Dudek can explain to you what that means. Okay.
Impervious subject to investigate.
Oh, and I'm sorry, and the last, the granted variance of the impervious surface, that's subject to satisfaction of the township engineer and the stormwater management requirements that would be attendant to the excess runoff created by the improvements. And that's a standard condition that's related to all impervious surface. So that would be the recommended motion.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We will have a written decision within 45 days of today. This hearing is concluded. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
So.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you can. We are adjourned.
You got anything in the door?